original request was for some trains from the Old West times, so the mid to late 1800s. But I found this book, and it encompasses the earliest locomotives to the more recent locomotives. This is the World Encyclopedia of Locomotives. On the front, we have an older locomotive, and we have some even older ones in some of the pictures down here, and then a newer one in the middle. And this is by Colin Garrett. Let's take a look on the back. The World Encyclopedia of Locomotives. Over 700 photographs and illustrations of locomotives from around the world. A definitive history of locomotive technology from the 1830s to the present day. Detailed specification boxes given for over 100 key locomotive designs. Charts the development of locomotive design throughout the world, including Britain, the United States, Canada, Europe, Australia, India, China, Japan, and the Pacific Rim. And here we have some older, brilliantly painted locomotives, black and red and gold trim. And this one says Jupiter on it. Then we have a newer, it looks kind of like maybe a 1950s train. And then we have some older trains here as well. Let's take a look inside. And here on this page, we have a lit up front end of a steam engine. Blue in the middle, red, with some gold. It's hard to tell because it's a dark picture, but this might be green or dark blue on the sides. So this was originally printed in 2001 with Ann's Publishing Limited, and it was updated in 2002, and it says Hermes House is an imprint of Ann's Publishing Limited in London. This is from this century, at least. The contents. We have the birth of the railway, the golden age from 1900 to 1950, and then the 1950s to the present day, a glossary and index. And here we have one of the very first train models, very simple, a smokestack and a cylinder on the front. You have the works that move the wheels around, kind of like an old sewing machine. section looks at the development of the railway from its very beginnings up to 1900, touching on both the technical changes it underwent and the role it played in societies and industries around the world. The text and photographs provide a comprehensive account of the railway pioneers and the machines and lines they created, while the technical boxes give an at-a-glance record of some of the most influential and innovative locomotives. And then this picture here is very dark in blacks and reds, and it's kind of hard to make out, but there is a very early steam engine in there. From tramways to steam. In Britain, one of the first tramways was built about 1630 to serve collieries near Newcastle upon Tyne. The Danfield Wagonway in County Durham was begun about 1725, and by 1727 included the Causey Arch, the world's first railway viaduct built by Ralph Wood. At first, the rails were made of wood, but these wore quickly, and in 1767 iron plates were affixed to them for durability. The first cast iron plates were made by the Coalbrookdale Iron Works in Shropshire. Plate rails, that is iron-flanged rails, were introduced underground at Sheffield Park Colliery in 1787 and on the surface at Ketley Incline in 1788. The stagecoach improves roads. Transportation in the 17th and 18th centuries was either by stagecoach or water. In 1658, the state of the roads was so bad that the stagecoach took 2 weeks to travel from London to Edinburgh. Even by the end of the 1700s, with responsibility for the maintenance of the main roads handed from parishes to turnpike trusts, the state of the roads was not much better. In winter, they were blocked by snow or floods. In summer, hard-baked ruts made journeys uncomfortable. This was acceptable while most travel was on horseback. With the ever-increasing use of coaches for public transport, however, the roads improved. By the 1750s, the stagecoach had come into its own. Railways replaced waterways. With industrialization, however, the need for transportation of heavy goods remained. By about the mid-18th century, artificial canals came into being as arteries for goods making their way to the larger rivers and to the sea for export for various parts of Britain. The waterway's half-century of posterity in public service ended, however, with the coming of the railways. Many became ruins or were bought by local railway companies. Turnpike roads ceased to be the chief arteries of the nation's lifeblood. Posting inns were replaced by hotels springing up at railway termini. The railway era saw the demise of the public mail coach and heavy family coach. In some instances, however, when such conservative-minded gentry as the Duke of Wellington traveled by rail, they sat in their coaches, which were placed on flat trucks. By 1840, with railways halving the cost of travel, canal and stagecoach were doomed. The first railways, in 1804, the world's first public railway company, the Surrey Iron Railway Company, opened a horse-drawn line from Wadsworth Wharf on the River Thames in South London to Croydon in Surrey. The line was extended to Merstham, Surrey, but never reached its intended destination, Portsmouth in Hampshire. Here we have the Rocket, a working replica built in 1980. This represents the appearance of the locomotive as it competed in the Rain Hill trials. So over here we So this must have been one of the first. You can tell it's just a little engine, a large smokestack here with a crown top, yellow and black, and the stack is in white. The rocket was built in 1829 by George Stephenson for the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. It's a 4-foot, 8.5-inch gauge train, type 022, and it had 2 cylinders outside, 8 by 17 and inclined. It had 50 pounds of pressure. It weighed a little over 4 tons. Here we have British locomotives of the 1830s. The Battle of the Gauges. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, 1806 to 59, conceived railways on a grand scale for his Great Western Railway. Authorized in 1835, he dismissed the well-established 4-foot, 8.5-inch gauge as inadequate to cope with the greater speeds, safety, and smoother travel he planned for his relatively straight and level main line from London to Bristol. So he fixed his gauge at a spacious 7-foot. The main drawbacks were that this set the GWR apart from all the other railways and meant that all goods and passengers had to change trains when traveling to or from areas not served by GWR trains. The first GWR train steamed out of Paddington Station, West London, on the 4th of June 1838 behind the Stephenson 222 North Star, a large example of the patentee type, which was originally built for the 5-foot 6-inch gauge New Orleans Railway in the USA. A broken contract caused her to be altered to 7-foot gauge and to go to the GWR instead. A sister engine, Morning Star, entered service at the same time. North Star had 7-foot driving wheels, and the inside cylinders were 16 by 16 inches. Obsolescence was rapid in those days, but North Star was rebuilt with a larger boiler and new cylinders in 1854, lasting in service for 33 years. When finally withdrawn, she was preserved at Swindon, Wiltshire, until, in an act of official vandalism, she was scrapped in 1906. In something of an atonement, GWR built a full-sized replica incorporating original parts in 1925. This is displayed at Swindon Railway Museum. Here we have the Iron Duke, and it is from 1847. It's still an open engine. The driver in the cart of open-engined passengers back here. Skip forward to some of the American locomotives. Here we go. Early North American locomotives. Again, we have kind of the early open engines with the wheels and the carts. Oh, this one has interesting. So this is the DeWitt Clinton was built for Mohawk and Hudson Line for the West Point Foundry, New York in 1831. And this one actually has a cart that they could put goods on, and then they actually have a stagecoach on rail car wheels, and there's some passengers riding in the stagecoach. Interesting. Then over here Wisconsin in England, it was assembled in the USA by Isaac Dribbs. He added a pilot, making it the first locomotive in America to employ a cowcatcher pilot. So here you have a little bit of a cover to it, so that they don't have to be standing out in the rain or weather. And then here it is in a museum. Here's another early type engine called Tom Thumb. The engineer outside. Let's read about the early Baldwin locomotives. In 1834, Baldwin, having already built Old Ironside, produced his second engine, the A.L. Miller. This was for the Charleston and Hamburg Railroad. Old Ironside's composite wood and iron wheels had proved fragile, so Baldwin fitted his six-wheeled machine with solid Bell metal driving wheels of 4'6" in diameter. A sister locomotive, Lancaster, appeared in June the same year and promptly set an American record by hauling 19 loaded cars over Pennsylvania's highest gradients between Philadelphia and Columbia. This persuaded the railway's directors to adopt steam power instead of horse traction, and they placed an order for Baldwin for 5 more locomotives. The first Baldwin engine, to have outside cylinders, the Black Hawk, was delivered to the Philadelphia and Trenton Railroad in 1835. Up here we have one of the early Baldwin's locomotive building shop, an old painting. I'm assuming somewhere on there is a larger opening to get the locomotive out. Here we have the Tahoe, a Baldwin built 260 mogul type, once operated by Virginia and Truckee Line in Nevada, displayed at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. So the very old, it actually has a covered engine room area that is in a dark red color. And then we have a black engine with gold trim, stack on the front. It's kind of a funnel shape. And then a very large lantern on the front for the light as they're going down the track. A guard to catch things on the front or snow to part the way. The wheels are painted gold and red. Over here we have this class 152-260 is typically of early wagon top boilered moguls from Baldwin. The usual array of fluted and flanged domes, the diamond chimney, short smoke box, cross-head-driven boiler feed pump with backup injector is completed by a decorated headlight. So this kind of reminds me of the toy trains that we would have when I was growing up. There was a coal box attached to the back of it. Looked a lot like this. Then the funnel-shaped flue, and then the decorative large lantern on the front. And here we have American locomotives from 1840 to 75. The years between 1840 and the American Civil War, 1861 to 65, saw locomotive production treble. By the end of the 1850s, not only were there 11 main American builders, but they had also progressed beyond the experimental stage to bulk production of well-defined standard types suited to local conditions. With the development of the railroad over the Appalachian Mountains, separating the American East from the West, Richard Norris and Son of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, extended the classic 440 by adding an extra coupled axle at the rear to become the 460 type, or 10-wheeler. This allowed a much larger boiler, and the extra pair of drivers gave 50% extra adhesion to cope with steep gradients. The use of bar frames by American locomotive builders allowed the simple enlargement of existing designs without needing to retool or create more workshop capacity. Here we have an old photograph, I believe, of the Pioneer, a 222 single driver bicycle type built in 1851 by Seth Wilmarth for the Cumberland Valley Railroad. This was the first locomotive to operate in Chicago. So it's a very small engine with two small front wheels and two larger back wheels. But it's built a lot like the bigger ones, a large funnel type stack in the front. This has a covered engineer's cabin. The coal box attached behind with another set of small wheels. This is the railroad depot at Nashville, Tennessee during the American Civil War. And you can see a lot of these trains. They're lined up, so there's a 1, 2, 3, 4 engines lined up here ready to go. There are coal boxes behind. And here we have the Jupiter. This is the replica of Central Pacific Railway's 440 Jupiter, and Union Pacific Railroad's number 119 stands at the Golden Spike National Monument, Promontory Point, Utah. We saw this on the outside of the book, but here, a little bit bigger, black engine and stack on the front, red painted trim, and the wheels have been also painted red, and then the tinder box, which here is filled with wood, and the name on the side, Jupiter, and 60 on the back, with gold lettering and gold trim. It's an attractive engine. It's so pretty. We have a typical American Express train of the 1860s, headed by a 440. This was the most important type of American locomotive, providing the flexibility for running at speeds over lightly laid and often rough track beds. So you have the engine here, and then you have all these passenger cars behind. This painting, a rock, and a tree. Then we have the 1855 Brooks-built General, owned by the Western and Atlantic Railroad. It's famous for its role in the American Civil War. It was stolen from the Confederacy by Union spies and involved in a great chase. This is a typical 440 American type of the period. Interesting. I wonder what a railroad chase looks like. I mean, you can only go one place, right? Down the railroad. Funnel stack, black. This one has a pretty good sized fuel car behind. was from 1875 to 1900. Industrialization and modernization meant free time and more spending money for the American workforce to buy things such as day trips and holidays. To meet this demand in the late 1870s, heavy traffic developed, especially weekend travel between Philadelphia and New Jersey. This called for longer passenger trains and faster schedules. Air brakes and anthracite. Until the 1870s, the 440 engine proved ideal for American railroads. Then faster, heavier traffic began to demand something larger. Bigger locomotives led to heavier rails, stronger bridges, bigger turntables, better cars, longer passing loops, and most important of all, air brakes that we're all extremely grateful for. George Westinghouse's compressed air brake replaced hand brakes almost immediately after he introduced it in 1868, allowing the high speed of modern trains. Baldwin's 5,000th production was the 422 Lovett Eames. Built in 1880, the locomotive was fitted with a wide grate Watton firebox for burning anthracite coal, a fuel fast replacing coke and wood. The 6'6" driving wheels made the locomotive well suited for high-speed passenger service. Baldwin guaranteed it would maintain a 60-mile-per-hour average speed, pulling 4 cars. It was to have been number 507 of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, but only ran trials before the railroad went bankrupt and returned it to her builder. Up here we have the 440 American type. Was the universal locomotive from the 1850 to 1895. More than 2,400 were built. On this high driver to Philadelphia and Reading Camelback design 440. The engineer rides above the boiler and the fireman behind. So you can see the engineer sticking his head out the window here. And then the fireman would have been back here with the box to put the fuel in. And then these are actually almost more modern looking passenger cars. Here we have a 280 type that was popular with narrow gauge railroads for high adhesions on mountain rails. This 1881 Baldwin, built for the D&RG, is displayed at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado. So an early engine, and this one is all in black. Here we have the 1895 Baldwin built 36-inch gauge 280 consolidation type. Was typical of locomotives operating in Colorado before the turn of the century. It's first operated on the Florence and Cripple Creek Railroad and later on the Denver and Rio Grande. It is displayed at Durango, Colorado. And this one's front has been painted a dull gray and then black. This, when built in 1886, this Baldwin 210 decapod was reported to be the world's largest locomotive. Number 500 and its sister, number 501, beat a temporary track across the mountains while a tunnel was being completed. Yeah, I imagine having a train being able to go through the mountains was a big deal. So this one is a very old photograph, and so it's It's kind of yellowed, and then the train is seen as kind of a gray color. Box behind. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wheels on a side, and then a few more. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the fuel cart. In this picture we have a 440 on the Pennsylvania Railroad. And this is a drawing. Actually, it's really, really detailed on the engine, the passenger cars, and then right down here is at least one person. There might be another one, it's hard to tell, waving at the train as it goes by. This is a 440 built in 1881 by Sharp Stewart of Glasgow, Scotland for the St. John and Maine Railroad, linking St. John and Maine. The older looking style, 1, 2, 3, 4, the front wheels are very small, so that would have been 8 total. Then you have the stack and the big lantern on the front. 2 hoods there, and actually the bell. You can see the line from the engineer's house that makes the bell swing. We'll cover a little bit of the American locomotive builders. The first British locomotive was imported into the USA in 1829. Within a year, the first American-built machine, the best friend of Charleston from the West Point Foundry of New York City, was on the rails. By the end of the 1830s, about a dozen workshops had tried their hands at locomotive building. By 1840, as railways were being built or projected in all parts of the USA, the 3 main American builders, Baldwin, Norris, and Rogers, had made 246 locomotives between them, the first 2 in Philadelphia and the 3rd in New Jersey. So here we have the William Crookes was the first locomotive to operate in Minnesota. It was built by the New Jersey Machine Works in Paterson, New Jersey in 1861 for the St. Paul and Pacific Railroad, a predecessor of the American Railway. Pioneering entrepreneur James J. Hill's Great Northern Railway. Hill was nicknamed the Empire Builder. So we did have the engineer sticking out the window right here, covered. Looks very much like some of the other. There's a little decorative shelf bracket here that holds the lantern on the front, and it's all vined and has leaves. It's pretty elegant looking. Then you have the passenger cars behind. Here we have the Rogers Locomotive and Machine Works of New Jersey, one of the USA's most important. The works produced 6,200 locomotives in the 76 years from 1837 to 1913. Here's an old advertisement for it, Rogers Locomotive and Machine Works. Locomotive engines and tenders and other railroad machinery. Then a drawing of the engine. So we have the Manchester Locomotive Works of Manchester, New Hampshire, built this high, delivered 440 American type for the Boston and Maine Railroad. All in black and white lettering. This one is from the Florence and Cripple Creek Railroad's number 20, a 36-inch gauge Schenectady built 460, later used by the Rio Grande Southern Railroad. And here's the number plate on another one. This book has so much information in it. Canadian locomotives and early European and other Europe to 1900. Chinese locomotives, Indian locomotives, basically all of the locomotives you could want around the world. East Asian, Australasian, South African, North African, North American, which does look very similar to, and then into the later years of railroad, although a lot of them look like, and especially in the early 1900s, very similar to the late 1800s, till they became more streamlined later on. Let me know if you're interested in seeing more of this train book, which is pretty informative and fascinating. I hope you enjoyed coming along for a little look at locomotives in the 1800s. I enjoy your comments, and I like to hear if there's something you want to see. Please don't forget to like and subscribe so that I can continue doing these videos for you. As always,